As you have probably seen, the new administration has begun with the execution of numerous executive orders. I had a student contact me to ask about the impact of these orders, and I thought I would pick about three of them to look at, three that I think are most impactful or that interest me most. Overall, I would say these orders constitute a dramatic expansion of executive power. The orders are likely to be subject to numerous legal challenges, and if they can survive those legal challenges, the orders may change the lives of millions of people. Let's start out by talking about what is an executive order. Now, an executive order is a directive issued by the President of the United States that manages operations of the federal government. Executive orders are not necessarily the law. Remember, the president doesn't make law, the president only executes the law, but they have the full force of law when they are based on the authority that's derived either from a statute or from the Constitution itself. Now, where does the power to issue executive orders come from? Article 2 of the Constitution grants the president broad executive and enforcement authority to use their discretion to determine how to enforce the laws passed by Congress or to otherwise manage the resources and staff of the executive branch. Executive orders can be used to direct federal agencies and officials in their execution of congressionally established laws or policies that have been established by the United States Congress. Executive orders can also be used to enforce treaties with foreign nations or to otherwise implement the president's constitutional powers. Executive orders can also be used to overturn or supersede prior executive orders. Now, executive orders are subject to judicial review, meaning courts can review these orders and they may be struck down if they are deemed to be either unconstitutional or in violation of existing laws. Congress can also pass legislation that would overturn or nullify an executive order. Of course, that's subject to the president's right to veto and Congress's power to override that veto. Now, we've seen executive orders used throughout American history to address a wide range of issues, things like national security or civil rights, economic policy, or environmental protection. The use of executive orders has been controversial. Some critics argue that they give the president too much power. They turn the president into more of a king than a president. However, supporters of executive orders argue that they're a necessary tool for the president to carry out their constitutional duties. Now, the first order that I would like to talk about is the one that was specifically referenced in the email to me, and that's withdrawing from the World Health Organization. Now, the executive order says that the U.S. is withdrawing due to the organization's mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this is the second time that President Trump has ordered the U.S. to be pulled out of the World Health Organization. Many argue that President Trump's dislike of the WHO is rooted in a perception that it was dominated by and therefore soft on China. President Trump has long believed that China was responsible for the spread of the virus. Now, of course, many fear the potential impact of the order. The U.S. is by far the largest individual funder of the World Health Organization. They contribute almost 20% of the total budget. Overall, this executive order withdrawing the U.S. from the WHO has the potential to significantly weaken both domestic and global health infrastructure. Supporters would argue that the U.S. withdrawal could prompt reforms about how the WHO works and therefore make it a body that better serves the public health needs of people around the globe. The next executive order that I find particularly interesting has to do with birthright citizenship. Now, the principle of birthright citizenship, meaning you are a citizen because you are born in the United States, is established in the United States Constitution. The 14th Amendment says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. It's pretty clear cut. Now, there have been attempts to distinguish this from the plain meaning of the statute by saying that there is something special in the subject to the jurisdiction thereof language. But I cannot imagine that this particular executive order will be upheld. I think there's virtually no way in which legally the president can restrict citizenship by an executive order. Now, there's several reasons for this. First of all, there's a federal statute that protects it. Even if there wasn't, the Supreme Court has expressly interpreted the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment to confer birthright citizenship in a case from 1898, a case called United States v. Wong Kim Ark. And that's a ruling that I'm pretty confident a majority of even this particular Supreme Court would follow. And three, there's really no way to distinguish this case, this precedent that already exists. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think that there are compelling reasons to believe that birthright citizenship is not going anywhere anytime soon. I believe that this order is going to be declared unconstitutional, but maybe that's the point. Maybe this executive order is about scoring political points, and when the president is eventually rebuffed, then that's going to make him even more popular from a political perspective. All right, the last executive order I want to talk about is Executive Order 11246. This is a very famous executive order. It was signed by President Lyndon Johnson back in 1965. And this executive order has survived through 60 years of American life. Now, what did 11246 do? Well, first of all, it prohibited discrimination in the hiring, promotion, and treatment based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin for those parties that were doing business with the federal government. In addition, and this is the controversial part, 11246 mandated affirmative action for federal contractors to ensure equal employment opportunities. This meant that people wanting to do business with the federal government would be required to take proactive steps to address disparities in their workforce and to promote diversity. Now, the third thing that the executive order did was to create the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, usually known as OFCCP. This Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs was established to ensure compliance with not only this executive order, but also the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which was aimed at disabled veterans, and the Vietnam-era Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act of 1974. Now, these affirmative action obligations required contractors to ensure that applicants and employees are being treated equally. The OFCCP has an obligation to conduct audits of companies to ensure their compliance on employment matters and employee compensation. Now, any contractor subject to the executive order knows that it can be time-consuming and resource-intensive to prepare affirmative action plans and to respond to these OFCCP audits. So is affirmative action dead? Probably yes. This one probably will not come back, at least not anytime in the next few years. But for those companies that want to maintain a diverse workforce, there are ways to do that that are not illegal. There are means to ensure a diverse workforce. I talk a lot about these in my employment law class, so if you're interested in more, I would encourage you to take that class. But just generally, using recruiting sources that provide diverse candidates is lawful, as long as they are not the exclusive sources of the candidates. Providing a mentoring program that is open to all employees is lawful, even if that mentoring program may be most utilized by women and other groups. In other words, companies should focus on actions that are actually inclusive and that do not exclude groups of employees based on a particular identity. I hope you found some of that interesting. If you have any questions or you have other matters you would like to ask a question about, feel free to reach out by email and maybe I'll put you in the next update. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.